Have you ever thought about what happens when a big company causes a disaster? What if there was a legal loophole that let them just walk away? Well, today we're diving into the landmark case that slammed that door shut for good. It completely redefined what corporate responsibility even means.
Okay, so the official name of the case is MC Mehta versus the Union of India. Yeah, I know, it sounds pretty formal, but trust me, what happened here in 1987 was a total earthquake for environmental law.
Most people, though, know it by a different name, one tied to the tragedy that started it all, the Oleum Gas Leak case. We're talking about a toxic gas leak right in the heart of Delhi that tragically killed an advocate and sent a lot of other people to the hospital. And you really have to get what happened here to understand why the court's final decision was such a game changer.
So this whole disaster really dragged a huge question out into the open. When a powerful corporation's activities go wrong and people get hurt, who's actually responsible? And maybe even more critically, are there any excuses? Can a company just say, oops, not our fault?
And you've got to understand, this wasn't just about punishing one company for one accident. Not at all. It was a catalyst for something much bigger. It was about creating a brand new legal shield to protect people in a world that was becoming more and more industrial.
So here's where it gets really interesting. The Supreme Court of India basically had to take a hard look at the law they were using. And this law, it was an old rule from 19th century England. The big question was, is this old school rule really equipped to handle the massive, complex dangers of 20th century industry? Was it enough?
Okay, so to really get the massive shift that happened, we need to talk about what the rule was before. The guiding principle at the time was something called strict liability.
Now, don't get me wrong, strict liability was pretty tough already. It basically said that if you're doing something potentially dangerous on your land and it causes harm, you're on the hook for it, even if you weren't being careless. But, and this is a huge but, it wasn't perfect, it wasn't foolproof.
See, the real problem with the old rule were the exceptions. You could almost call them escape hatches. A company could potentially argue, hey, it was an act of God, like a freak earthquake. Or they could say a third party did it. These are the very loopholes that could let a giant corporation wriggle off the hook.
So with the tragedy of the Oleum gas leak staring them in the face, the court decided, you know what? For industries that are messing with super dangerous stuff, these loopholes are just not okay. It was time to create something totally new, something much, much stronger.
And what they did next was incredibly bold. They didn't just tweak the old rule. Nope. When it came to hazardous industries, they basically threw it out the window. They created a brand new legal standard, one that was built specifically for the modern world.
And what they came up with was absolute liability. And honestly, the name says it all. The principle is simple. If your company is involved in something hazardous or inherently dangerous and harm results from it, you are absolutely liable to compensate everyone affected. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. No excuses. The liability is, well, absolute.
All right, let's put these two ideas, strict liability and absolute liability, right next to each other. It makes the difference crystal clear.
I mean, the difference is just night and day, right? You've got strict liability with all its defenses and exceptions based on that old English rule, and then you have absolute liability, zero exceptions, a modern principle developed right in India specifically for these ultra-hazardous industries.
And this quote from the court's actual judgment, wow, it just nails the whole idea. The court said the company has an absolute and non-delegable duty to the community. Think about that. It's not just about paying up after the fact. It's a duty. It means you can't pass the buck to someone else. The community's safety is your job. End of story.
Okay, if all the legal jargon is getting a little heavy, here's a super simple way to think about it. Strict liability, that's kind of like owning a really big dog. You're definitely responsible for it. But hey, if someone breaks into your house and the dog bites them, you might have a defense, right? Now, absolute liability, that's like keeping a pet tiger. If that tiger gets out and causes chaos, there are no excuses. The fact that you chose to keep a tiger in the first place means you accept total, 100% absolute responsibility for anything and everything it does.
So why are we even talking about a legal principle from 1987? Why does it matter so much today? Well, because its impact was massive, reaching way beyond just this one incident.
It completely flipped the script on how we calculate justice for victims of industrial disasters. Before this, victims had this huge uphill battle trying to fight a big corporation that had all these legal loopholes to hide behind. After this case, the burden was placed squarely on the shoulders of the hazardous industry to make sure no harm happens in the first place, full stop.
And there's one more piece to this that was a total game changer. The court didn't stop there. They also established a new rule for compensation. They said the amount of money paid to victims has to be related to the size and financial capacity of the company itself. Put simply, the bigger and richer the company, the bigger the compensation they have to pay. It's a principle sometimes called deep pockets.
So let's wrap this up with the key takeaways. What do you really need to remember? First, a brand new, much stricter legal standard was born: absolute liability. Second, and this is the big one, there are zero, and I mean zero, exceptions for companies involved in hazardous stuff. And third, the compensation is directly tied to the company's ability to pay. It's all about making sure that justice is real and meaningful, not just a slap on the wrist.
And that brings us to a really interesting thought for today. This whole principle was designed for the dangers of the industrial age. Think chemical plants and big factories. But what about the hazardous activities of the 21st century? We're talking about things like artificial intelligence or genetic engineering. How does this powerful idea of absolute liability evolve to handle the new kinds of tigers we're creating in our own backyards today?